Again, thank you for reconvening after that stimulating service this morning. We're meeting here because we wanted people to have plenty of space, but I'm also going to encourage you to move forward if you're comfortable doing so that Ms. Lythcott-Haims has a good audience to face. Diane is handing out cards and pencils in the event you have a question you want to jot down that we can pose to her in the course of her discussion. We also can take questions at the end. We'll have a microphone to do that. And I think that while Julie's going to deliver some words, I think she'd love this to be interactive. So I encourage you to pose your questions. By way of introduction, I could be here for 30 minutes talking about this woman, this real American. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's a writer, she's a mentor, she's an activist. She has degrees from Harvard and Stanford. She's worked in corporate law. She was a provost at Stanford. She's done some really unique things at Stanford. She's engaged with a number of nonprofits. And I think most of us know her through her writing. Her book, How to Raise an Adult, was on the New York Times bestseller list. Her memoir, Real American, which I'm almost done reading, is enlightening and amazing and surprising. As I think we've mentioned in some of our announcements, those of us who went through Sacred Ground had the opportunity, which I hope some of you did through the link that we shared, to listen to a video discussion between Julie and Pastor Coloma Smith that was sponsored by the Palo Alto Library, and it was to talk about, what would an anti-racist community look like? And we were so moved by what we heard from both of them that we knew we wanted Julie to come and talk to the rest of the parish. So that's one of the reasons she's here, and I guess the best way to introduce her is to use her own words. I believe in humans. I'm rooting for all of us to make it. I've come to appreciate that despite our innumerable differences, we all want to be treated with dignity and kindness. We all yearn to know that we matter. We all want to be seen, accepted, and loved simply as we are. I'm interested in what gets in the way. St. Mark's friends, please welcome Julie Lythcott-Haims.
Thank you so much, Anne, for inviting me to be a part of your amazing St. Mark's community as part of becoming beloved community, which I know is your focus. It's an honor to be invited to be in my own community talking about things of mutual interest. I'm seeing friends' faces in the crowd. It's a joy to come. Although I don't worship here, I'm one of those spiritual but not religious people who finds myself in a place of worship and feels very connected and grounded. So thank you for welcoming me in. I appreciate the honor of being in my own community. I got a little off track because I saw Julia Hartung smiling at me, and I'm like, wow, another friend is here. Father McDermott, thank you, Anne, thank you. I do have the pleasure and privilege of getting to speak about my work nationally. Being an author has been such a joy. It's been my work for 10 years. And I go to other communities in this country and others even, but when my own city of Palo Alto invites me to do something, it feels exponentially more rewarding to be asked within my own community to offer something of use is a humbling privilege, and I appreciate that you have extended it to me. In addition to Julia, I've also seen Trudy and Timmy, and then I had the surprise of running into Kathy Gillum, whose partner husband, Richard, was one of my most favorite instructors, faculty members at Stanford in the 1980s when he offered his signature course on the 1960s. And in the 1980s, we thought we had overcome. We thought we had overcome all of that, and it was in the rearview mirror, and renowned faculty at Stanford could teach us about it, could teach us about the problems of the past, and we could be inspired that we were no longer those people. And here we are in 2022, dismayed at how history has repeated itself. which the historians, of course, told us happens. But we didn't want to believe that as young, inspired 20-somethings in a classroom. We wanted to believe we were already transcending and that all of those bad things were behind us. And they are not. And so I'm delighted to get to be here and reflect on our current moment and to invite all of us to ask ourselves, who are we in this moment? We all like to say, if I had lived in Nazi Germany, if I had lived in Europe in the 30s, I would have, fill in the blank, done the right thing. Or if I lived in the Jim Crow South in the early and middle part of the 20th century, and was witnessing what was happening, I would have. We all know what we would have done. And I want to invite you to consider that we are in one of those moments now in our America. And it is not the moment we wanted, and it is not a moment we would have chosen, and yet we are the people who are here, and it is on us to decide what we're going to do about it. And I come to you in that spirit of invitation to ask, what is it I personally need to do? And we, my family, and we, my church community, and my neighborhood, and my Palo Alto, and my California, and my America needs to do, so that when young people are taking history classes in 20 years and 50 years, they will look back and discover that we did the right thing. Ooh, I didn't expect to cry on a Sunday morning. Here I am. Okay, so I'm gonna, right? Okay, yeah, I think that's right. Professor Gillum, I'm feeling all the feels. How inspired I felt in your class. Thank you so much for what you taught us. Okay, so I want to start a little bit with my Palo Alto story because my sense of belonging and unbelonging is rooted here. And then I'm going to go back and tell you my origin story. I got to be a 54-year-old. I started as a small child, and I've had my own experiences with unbelonging, with microaggressions, with implicit bias, and so on. And so I'm going to start here. I'm going to go back to the past and tell you a little bit about how I grew up. And then we're going to get real specific on kind of what do we do in this moment. And then I'm going to take your questions. And then we'll go on with our day. So my Palo Alto story began in 1985. I arrived here from Wisconsin to be an undergraduate across the street at Stanford. I was 17. In those years, if you recall, if you lived here then, University Avenue's traffic lights were simple, and they would just blink red starting at about 9 p.m. or 9:30. It was a sleepy town. It was a college town, but it was quiet. We hadn't yet become Silicon Valley. Stanford was emerging into its world-class eminence. It wasn't yet then. It was an amazing place, but it wasn't what it would become in prominence, nor was Palo Alto. And I came here and fell in love with the weather. Wisconsin weather. It was already practically snowing by now in October in Wisconsin, but here in Palo Alto, it was this incredible cloudless blue sky, an improbably blue sky, no clouds. I had never seen a sky without clouds. I felt as if I was visiting Hollywood and was on a movie set with a fake sky that was perfect, but it wasn't fake. It was real. It was Palo Alto and the Bay Area more broadly. I fell in love with the weather, no humidity either, not many bugs to speak of. If you grow up in the Midwest, the summer is filled with the sounds of screen doors slapping shut. You have to have the screen door because otherwise the bugs, the flies will come in. And I used to brag to people, we don't have flies here. And I would leave the doors open, and then a lizard walked in. It's like a different type of flora and fauna in Palo Alto. And I fell in love with all of those things, as well as the diversity. This place is far more diverse even than Wisconsin, where I had spent most of my growing up years. And so I felt the presence of the Pacific Rim and of the African American community and the Latino community and the Native community and the queer community. There were just so many more folk here, and I felt a sense of rootedness that had eluded me in my childhood. I grew up in a lot of different places, and I'll mention that when I get back to my origin story, but suffice it to say, it suffices to say that I felt the diversity, the weather, the politics. I loved the progressiveness here. I fell in love with all of that, and I also fell in love with a guy named Dan. He was 19, I was 20. We were at Stanford together. He was from Connecticut, I was from Wisconsin. We fell in love with each other as we were falling in love with this place, and we just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary this summer. Yeah. And so we went back east. We were engaged before he graduated Stanford. We got married back east while I was in law school at Harvard. We didn't try to set roots in Cambridge. We didn't try to like Cambridge, nor did Cambridge try to like us. We found the Boston area more hostile, and he's white and Jewish, Dan is. I am black and biracial. And so we had always intended to just go there and come back to Palo Alto. Our Palo Alto homeownership dream came true in 2000. We had finally conceived a child after some effort, and we're living in San Carlos, owned our first home, and my mother, who was newly widowed and living back east, said, I might be willing to come to California to help you raise that kid, which was such a gift, the possibility of 3-generational living. Some of you know my mother, Julie Lythcott. She sold her home back east, which was large, for the same amount of money we sold our tiny little San Carlos starter home for. So the equity from my mother's house and the equity from our San Carlos house were put together to buy a truly damaged house in Palo Alto that nobody wanted in 2000. And we went that route to get our kids to the Palo Alto Unified School District. And we became a 3-generational household, and really the house was quite damaged. It had a 6-inch slope from front to back, and the windows were cracked and the chimneys were cracked, and so it was significantly renovate and add on a wing for mom so that we had our sort of nuclear family and so privacy and proximity, or it was tear it down and start over. And financially tear it down and start over is the only thing that made sense, and we did all the right things and were permitted and even went through voluntary design review, which helped you get to the front of the permitting line. And the designers and architectural review board said, we love this house. Please, we want to see more of these in Palo Alto. But our neighbors were unhappy and wrote a nasty petition and stuffed it in our mailbox, which was on the garage, which was still standing as the home was being rebuilt. And I had a 2.5-year-old and a new baby wearing her in front of me and a baby Bjorn when we convened a neighborhood meeting to try to talk about their concerns. Our house, the stucco was going on when they chose to write this nasty petition telling us our home was ugly and we should make these changes. They drew crude drawings of what we should change. And I thought, who are these people and why are they so unkind? What gives them the right to tell a young family with limited resources how we should design our house when our city has approved it? What is the mindset that says it's perfectly fine to behave this way? It was 2000 and here it is 22 years later, and you see my emotion because I'm always caught off guard by unkindness. And because I believe in us, I believe we're so much better than that. And so we called this neighborhood meeting to try to address their concerns. We weren't going to change our house. It was permitted. It was going up. But could we improve our neighborly relations? And the crowd was hostile, mean. And then a neighbor, Eva, married to Gordon, who since both have passed away. Eva, after about 12 minutes, she had her head down and she looked up at her neighbors. And she said, this doesn't feel like the Christian thing to do. And she put her head down. And half of them nodded and walked away. And the other half stayed and began to eat some of the bagels and coffee we had brought to try to grease the possibility for connection. One set refused to speak to us from that day to this. When we came by with our little children at Halloween, they would offer the children candy and stare right through us. Even though we'd say hi, they would ignore us. So mad about the house we had dared to build to shelter our family. And so I have been deeply interested in Palo Alto's sense of itself for quite some time. My children are proud graduates of Gunn. I am proud that they have gone there, Briones, Fletcher, Gunn. And yet, as somebody who volunteered at a fundraiser for Briones, which was a murder mystery party, to raise funds for the PTA. Buy a ticket to this murder mystery party, come. And I was working the party as my way to contribute. And it was a murder mystery, so everyone's in character. And somebody showed up in blackface, right? And you've read about this in your history books, and your history teachers taught it to you, and you think that was then, there, other places, the South, the 50s. This was Palo Alto, I think 2013. And I just felt so frightened, as I watched other people not dismayed. I watched my neighbors gather and laugh, and I searched the crowd for somebody else who could appreciate how demeaning this was. And I found the eyes of a Native American Stanford professor, also a neighbor, and he and I looked at each other like, what do we do? These are our neighbors, they're drinking alcohol, they're having fun. Do we dare stop the music and call attention to this moment that needs to be discussed, or will we be laughed at? And so I decided to just leave and write a letter. And word on the street was that I was oversensitive and had overreacted in our Palo Alto to blackface showing up at a party. And I have met with unkindness at the door a few times when I have knocked on a neighbor's door to ask something or to say, I accidentally think I swiped your car a little bit when I drove past. I got too close. There's a little paint on the side. I just want to let you know that was me, and I'll pay. I was going with goodwill to say I might have swiped your car accidentally, not a dent even, but just a bit of a scuff. Knocking on the door, hearing people, knocking on the door, knocking again, and the person opens. Yeah, what is it? What is it that you need? Like I'm trying to sell magazines with my brownness. I'm a neighbor. Hi, I'm Julie. I'm actually embarrassed to say I might have scuffed your car, and that was me. And I've been met by that presumption that you're not here with any kind of goodwill or a neighbor talking to a neighbor, but rather somebody who doesn't belong. And they're tiny little moments, but when people presume you do not live or belong in the city that you have called home longer than anywhere else, it's very alienating. I love Palo Alto, and I think we have work to do right here, and we're not necessarily even aware of the work we need to do. My origin story is this. I'm 54, I've told you that. I am the child of an African American father and a white British mother who dared to fall in love in 1962. My African American father was a public health doctor tasked by the CDC in Atlanta to go to West Africa with a team to help eradicate smallpox, of a scourge, a plague, a virus. He did that. My mother came from England, 20 years his junior. My dad was 43, my mom was 22. She came from England to teach math and science to nursing students in Ghana. He was set up in Ghana. They were at an expat American-British party in Accra, Ghana, where they sat on a couch in 1962 and fell in love and stayed in love and are still in love. My father passed away in 1995. They were together from 62 to 95. My parents, who broke many rules to dare to marry and have me. They had me in Lagos, Nigeria in 1967. That's where the smallpox effort was headquartered by that time. We came to the States in 69. My mother became a naturalized citizen. I was born an American because of Daddy. So I come from people who transgress the rules of society to be in love and to form a marriage and to form a child. I knew something was wrong with my parents' marriage. I learned that from the faces of strangers. I learned that from classmates. I learned that in the early 70s in New York, where we lived. I knew something was wrong with Daddy. I learned that from the faces of strangers and people we knew. I learned that something was also wrong with me. This was what a child of 3 and 4 ingested from the messages, explicit and implicit, in my community. We lived in New York. My dad was then, he was at Columbia. We went to UW-Madison, where he had an opportunity there, so that's where I spent 3rd and 4th grade. And then we moved to DC because Daddy was tapped by President Carter to be the Assistant Surgeon General of the United States of America. And so we lived in Fairfax County, Northern Virginia, Reston, and I was in 5th through 8th grade there. And in 5th grade, one of my best friends got pulled into gifted and talented, as they called it, the accelerated lane for kids who showed particular academic promise. And I knew Susie was smart, but I also knew Susie was not smarter than me. And I came home to my teacher, mother, and said, Mom, Susie's in this thing. She's doing cool projects and puzzles. It sounds really fun. You know, shouldn't I get to try things like that? She said, absolutely, this doesn't seem right. Let me get in there. With the privilege of her education background and her whiteness and, you know, our middle-class status, my mother went to advocate to my teacher that I should be gifted and talented. My teacher, Mr. Pulansky, was not persuaded. So Mom escalated to the principal, insisting that I be tested. They brought in someone from the district, gave me an IQ test. It was the funnest test I had ever done in my 10 years at that point. And they mailed the results to our house. And Mom didn't realize I was watching when she opened the envelope and read the results, and she hid the letter away in a drawer. Okay, but I peeked at the letter, so I saw the results. I was put in gifted and talented soon after. And shortly after that, we were having a 5th grade assembly, and as we were assembling and the teachers were at the front of the room, Mr. Pulansky stood with his arms across his chest like this, talking to the other teachers casually, and he said, apparently all it takes to be gifted is for your parent to meet with the principal. And he landed his eyes on mine, 10 years old, in his audience as his student. My teacher said that to the room about me. Apparently, all it takes to be gifted is for your parent to meet with the principal. I was 10. I knew what he was doing. I knew he was intimating that I did not deserve the spot, that I had not earned it. But I had peeked at the letter, and it said I was the 99th percentile. It also listed my IQ, so I knew that he was wrong. And though I was 10, it was the first time in my young life, I think, that I uttered in my brain a very silent F you. I knew what he was up to. Reagan beat Carter. We had a peaceful transition of power. Let us never take that for granted. Carter was a 4-year president. Reagan fired my dad, okay? We left. The new administration moved in, and we moved back to Wisconsin. And my parents bought a home with land in an all-white neighborhood. And I attended a high school of 1,200 white kids, 2 Jewish kids who were not considered white by the white folks, and me. I was too young to know the word ally. We didn't speak in that language then. This was the 80s. The Jewish kid, one of them went on to become a Supreme Court justice in the state of Wisconsin. We didn't know yet then, as 13, 14, 15-year-olds, that there was potential allyship between us, black people and Jewish people. So we were desperately lonely in our identities. And I was working hard and doing well, and my best friend, one day I went over to her house in the 10th grade. She was 15, I was 15, and she was watching Gone with the Wind on her VCR. She loved the movies from Hollywood's golden era. She was always wrapped up in them, and here she was watching Gone with the Wind, and I, came over to hang out, as kids did, I found her in the rec room watching, I want to say Netflix, right, but it was her VCR, and she looks up from this black and white depiction of the antebellum South, and she says, hey, and I'm like, hey, wouldn't it have been great to have lived back then? And I say, no. And she says, why not? And she's looking at the outfits, the manner, the magnificence of this plantation. And I say, because I would have been a slave. And she says, oh, but I mean if you weren't black. And I say, but I am black. And she says, I don't think of you as black. I think of you as normal. So on the one hand, I was being taught, whatever you've gotten you didn't deserve. You're problematic. I will not see the strength of your brain because all I can see is your brownness in my classroom. And yet I was being told, don't worry, you're not black. You're not that. You're normal. So I was ping-ponging between, trying not to be the stereotype and prove that I could, while also being told that when you prove you're different, then we don't lump you in with them, who you are ancestrally. We put you here with us. So I was unbelonging everywhere. My all-white school classmates made me the student body president senior year. I was 17 that November, turned 17 the November Reagan won again, 84. And I had actually caucused for Jesse Jackson, who was running for the Democratic nomination. I was still 16, so couldn't vote that spring of my junior year. But I remember the fierce certainty and strength I felt caucusing for this man, Jesse Jackson, who was making a run for it and making a go of it and lifting all of us because he was being well regarded in that race, his Rainbow Coalition. And I stood up and caucused in my town in Wisconsin for this man, Jesse Jackson. That was maybe my first political act. So now I'm a senior and I'm student body president. I'm feeling beautiful. I'm strong, smart. I got a nice dress on. I've smoothed my hair straight as I always did, make sure it looked just like my friends, at least until the humidity of the day would take over and poof it out. And my best friend, the one with the Gone with the Wind remark, still fiercely my best friend in those days, she had made me a birthday sign for my locker. We did this for each other. It was sort of like a 1980s precursor to Instagram. Imagery, you'd cut out images from Tiger Beat and 17 and Teen Magazine, beautiful women and beautiful, inspiring words. And she'd made this 5-foot-long sign, taping paper together to make a long sign to celebrate my birthday, and taped it to my locker. So I'm walking into school, feeling the pride of I'm 17, I'm beautiful, strong, and smart, and I'm in a dress and heels. Even though it's winter in Wisconsin, you just know how to navigate that thing. And I get to my locker and I see this beautiful sign and I thank her, and people are saying happy birthday and I'm saying thank you, and I'm kind of feeling like the man, like I own the place, like I'm student body president, it's my birthday. And I'm thanking my friend, and it's just, I'm feeling, it's a good day. And at about 10:30 in the morning, I came back to my locker. It was maybe after a second or third period. I needed to swap out my books, and somebody had written the N-word on my sign. So ignorant that they only spelled it with one G, which I knew to be Niger, the country in Africa. I knew about Africa, having been born in Nigeria to parents who'd also lived in Ghana. We knew about Africa in my family. We had art, artifacts, stories of living in West Africa. But this ignorant person did not know how to spell it, but knew they needed to say it to knock me down. They wrote it in 3 places on my sign, in the white space in between the imagery and the words. And I was so embarrassed, I just pressed my body up against my locker so no one else would see it as the kids were changing in the passing time between classes. And then when everybody had gone to class, I raced to the office and asked for a black magic marker, and they didn't bat an eyelash over why I wasn't in class because I'm a student body president. I must be up to some good. I take the marker and I cross out, I make black boxes over the offensive words on my birthday sign. And so I've covered it. And I take the sign home at the end of the day and put it in my senior year scrapbook. I cut out the bad words. I fold the sign in accordion style so it can be folded out to reveal its magnificence and folded back. It's next to the homecoming ticket stubs, my birthday sign. And it remains in my scrapbook in my garage in Palo Alto. I thought I had taken the words and cut them out and thrown them in the trash. I had thrown them in the trash, but they were already embedded in my spirit. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell the school, my parents, my best friend, my boyfriend. I didn't want to draw further attention to the fact of my difference. I also wasn't sure anybody would have done anything about it. And so I didn't tell a soul. That happened when I was 17. I finally opened up to the truth of it at 44, when I had been a corporate lawyer and a Stanford dean and was now back in grad school trying to gain the confidence to write books. And I was in a poetry class where I wrote a poem about the voices in my life in high school. And this voice, the unnamed, anonymous racist, that came out in a poem at 44. So I hid it. I emerged from that out to Stanford. I came here full of self-loathing, trying to never be called the N-word again, trying to prove that I deserved to be in every class I was in, trying to never be wrong. I'd started as this innocent child and plunged into the place of self-loathing and lived here from maybe 15 until 39, outwardly successful, degrees from the right schools, corporate lawyer, now I'm a Stanford dean, but I'm still just operating in a way that prevents the wrath, that avoids the disdain. I'm trying to be who they will value. I do not love myself intrinsically. I love myself when I have met with the approval of mainstream white society that has taught me over and over again that they are judging me constantly. So I'm working with a coach at Stanford who's been brought in to work with our team, John Brovman's team. Julia knows, some of you know, Kathy knows. He was the vice provost for undergraduate education. I was dean of freshmen and undergraduate advising at this point. I'm on his team. I'm the youngest. I'm the only person of color. I have the wrong degree. They all have PhDs in liberal arts disciplines like French literature. Well, he was a material science guy, but my degree is just a JD from Harvard Law School. I've never been so ashamed to only have a JD from Harvard Law School than when I was working at Stanford, because the PhD is supreme, and then these other degrees, even though the faculty at the law school tend to only have JDs, I don't know how they deal with that in faculty meetings, but here I was, just sort of wrong, young, of color, wrong degree, and trying to, do good things for Stanford undergraduates. So this coach was brought in to help us work more collegially, John with his team. And I thought I was doing great, and if I could just help the coach tell other people what they needed to improve, I thought I was crushing it. But I learned over the course of, my time with the coach that I had stuff to work on too, and I trusted her. After a year, she gave me feedback from my colleagues that I was too emotional, you've seen that already, too emotional and too aggressive. And I was like, wow, that is so unoriginal, to call your one black colleague female, too emotional and too aggressive, could you at least have picked different words? And she said, I'm not abiding the stereotype. I want you to know that. I said, I get that, Mary Ellen. She said, what do you think? And I said, well, sometimes I am emotional because stuff is hard, or sometimes I am big in my personality. I used to be a litigator, a lawyer, argue and win. My family's that way. I was a lawyer. And she says, how's it working for you? And I said, well, I often have to apologize. I've overstepped. The bad thing happened. I respond or react, and then my reaction is too much. So then we're focusing on that instead of the underlying thing. I said, I want to, she's like, yes. So how can we help you be more in charge of your emotion? So you decide when to bring it, and you decide when you don't need to. She taught me mindfulness. She taught me how to notice when I'm feeling a thing and it makes me want to, to decide, all right, Julie, what are you feeling? Love myself through it. What am I feeling and why? What do I want to do? Do I want to speak or not? If I want to speak, is now the time? If so, what do I want to say for impact? And what I learned was the trigger for me of my emotion was this presumption that, you're wrong, you're not welcome, all of the things that for me are around my blackness. If I perceived that psychologically at all, I was right there with my own defense. And she helped me develop this mindfulness practice that allowed me to simply be more in charge of myself and choose my moments. I thought I might feel silence, but instead I felt so much more effective and impactful. And one day I was able to admit to Mary Ellen, as we were unpacking where these triggers in me come from, I was able to share some of my childhood stories with her. And I said 3 things that I was so ashamed to say. And by the time I was saying them, I was crying and, like ugly crying. And
I said, Mary Ellen, as a kid, I hated being black. Number 2, I was afraid of black people. Number 3, I just wanted to be what white people valued. And I told her as a kid, but I think I was saying up until right now, this may have been true for me, Mary Ellen. And I thought I was the only person of color, only black person who'd ever felt that way. I've since learned that many, many of us take on what we call internalized oppression when we're members of a group, whether it's a racial group or a religious group or what our gender is or our sexual orientation or our ethnicity, etc. When we're members of groups about which negative stereotypes are held, we can believe the stereotypes and loathe ourselves because of it and loathe our people. And that harms us. So I admitted this all to her, and she held that space for me. And y'all, I was transformed. The next day, I came onto our campus where I had been a dean for many years. I had been an undergraduate. I knew so many people. I knew a lot of black folks, faculty, staff, and students, some from when I was a student. And that next day, after this dislodging of this shameful stuff, my had hated being black, had been afraid of black people, had just tried to be what white people wanted, my having dislodged it from my spirit, somehow it changed me for the good. So I walked onto our campus and looked, as I made my way to my office in Sweet Hall, I ran into some black folks as I made my way, and they were all smiling at me. Every single black person was smiling at me. It was like they had gotten a memo saying, "Would you smile at Julie today?" But that's not the way this works. They had not given a memo, okay? Here's the best way I can explain it. I was finally smiling at myself. I could accept my brown and black self with my white mother and my light skin and this way of speaking. I loved myself finally. I had dislodged the hate by naming it. And so I was smiling within and therefore lit from within with self-love, and I could look into the eyes of all the black folk, and they weren't smiling at me, sui generis. I was smiling at them, and they were smiling back. And somebody who had been on campus since I was a student, a black woman, Mary Haynes, said, "Julie, we've been waiting for you all along, waiting for you to show up with self-love and embrace who you are." It was the most beautiful thing. So I have been on my journey around race, around belonging. I have tried to raise my own kids to intrinsically love themselves in their multiraciality with a white parent and a black biracial parent in this town. I have tried to offer them things to root themselves to so that they are strong when the world sends a big gale. All right, that's a little bit about me. I guess what I will close that story by saying, the bully of racism, the internalized oppression of racism was chasing me from 15 to 39. And I finally that day in my office with Mary Ellen turned around and faced the bully, called it out, and it ran away. And I think that kind of growth is available to all of us. So let's talk about our moment. I've been asked if I can identify and help us think about how to identify and counter microaggressions in our day-to-day lives. And I will tell you that microaggressions are happening at our hand. We are often, all of us, occasionally, because of our biases, we are perpetuating them without meaning to, but we are. And we are also witness to them when other people are perpetuating them. So I want to offer you that learning and growth is available, just as I said out loud the things that my heart didn't want to admit, that I had been biased against my own group. To say that to myself released me of it, okay? To acknowledge it. I wrote a book called Real American, which Anne alluded to. And hundreds, thousands of people, black people, brown people, marginalized people in other groups, have said to me, "You wrote in your book the truth of my own existence, Thank you for saying it out loud. I feel less alone. I have learned that so many of us embody some element of self-loathing because of what the media, society, our, the neighborhoods in which we grew up, what we learned about us from others. And we have to ultimately develop a sense of self, our own narrative about I am worthy of love because I am God's child, because I'm a child of the universe. It doesn't matter what they think because I am infused with self-love and I take this belonging to self with me wherever I go, and that is where I am now, and I want to offer us all that it is available. So if you know you are implicitly biased against your own group, I want you to hear my story and think about what work you want to do to overcome that so that you can inhabit a body, a being, a soul, a spirit with a heart and a mind that is self-loving, because you will be of more use to your family, in your relationships, in your community, if you are out there with self-love. And if you are willing to entertain that you might be a little biased against some other people who are different than you, I offer to you, yes, me too. I have been there. But my mindfulness practice allows me to notice. I have a running dialogue now with myself where I could be in a meeting as I am now, and my mindfulness practice is telling me how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. And I can notice I'm about to stereotype a person. If I go to have a meeting, sit down, and that person doesn't look like I thought they were going to look for whatever reason, their presentation is different than I assumed it would be, or I'm looking at them and all of a sudden my brain with its stereotypes is filling in assumptions. My mindfulness practice goes, oh, hey, you're about to stereotype them because of what they look like. How about we treat them like they're our best friend instead? And then the smile lights my face, and I'm like, hey, I'm Julie. Thanks for meeting with me. Appreciate you. How are you? And to be curious and kind with this person and treat them as if they are my best friend or me. Because, as Anne said when she introduced me, we all just want to be treated with dignity and kindness. And if I can just dislodge that stereotype that is trying to come in, if I can tell my brain, not today, brain, we're going to treat this person with dignity and kindness, that is available to each of us in every moment we interact with other humans in this church, on the street, at the grocery store, at the bank, on a sidewalk. We can decide, hey, I think this person probably wants to be treated with dignity and kindness. What if I'm the person who does that today? And then their day is better, and then our day is better. And anyone who watched the interaction is motivated to be that kind. And y'all, this sounds simplistic, but I do believe it is how we heal our human society, all of us getting our radical kindness on. All right, the other question I got was how to address racial injustice in this and other faith groups. And what I want to offer you is this. I'm sorry, I've been ignoring y'all the whole time. I didn't even realize there were people over here. Now that I've stopped crying, I can look around and see like I should be doing this and apologizing. Okay? Hate is the mask and cloak that fear wears. So if we want to change hate, we have to be willing to engage people around their fears. And to engage people around their fears, we have to be interested in hearing their story. So what we need to be doing in our families at Thanksgiving, where so often we have that person, and we're like, right? We have to be willing to treat them with dignity and kindness. And when they say something we can't abide, to say, you know what, let's talk about where that, how can I better understand you? Each one of us is a hurting child somewhere, not maybe all of us, but so many of us. And if you can get to the root, when each one of us wants to be seen as a person. So our work with our families and our congregations and our neighborhoods is to get braver at sitting with people with whom we disagree and trying to make some progress to engage and listen and see if we can find some place of common ground. Maybe it's the Raiders, or it's the 49ers, or it's a piece of music, or it's a book, or it's pickleball, or it's our dogs, or it's something. There's a friend of mine who lives in the South, in Auburn, Alabama, in a largely conservative town. And he's a white liberal, straight white liberal playwright. And he's making plays in Auburn, in Alabama, because he thinks the ground is fertile for growth. And he says, at the dog park, you can tell if somebody's a jerk or not, because if the dog is a jerk, the owner is a jerk. Good dog does not have a jerk owner. I hope I'm not offending. Some of you are like, I have a bad dog, but I'm not a bad person. Fine. This is my friend's theory, that when he goes to the dog park and he sees good dogs, and he sees the owner of that dog wearing a MAGA hat, he's like, well, the dog is good, so the person must be good. So maybe there's room for connection with this person. We have to get beyond our hats and our T-shirts and our labels and be willing to engage the humans. And then we have to be brave enough to align our values with our actions. So to be upstanders, not bystanders. We have somebody running for city council in this city who's running on a platform of anti-LGBT, among other things. And I confronted her on Sunday, and it was hard. I heard some really hateful things, but I have decided not to stand by, but to stand up. I have decided to use my voice, and it might make me flutter emotionally, but we have to get our bravery on and try to have conversations with people across these divides. Somebody needs to hear you stand up and say, that's not okay with me. I'm concerned about what you're saying. Let me learn more, but let me also say what I think and what I believe. There are children listening who need us to stand up. And you stand up within yourself. You don't say, it offends that group when you say this. You say, I am not okay with this. When a joke is told, when blackface shows up, when somebody is marginalized or demeaned, own it as your own concern, as opposed to trying to stand up and be a rescuer for somebody else. Rescue them by saying it's not okay with me either. I have found that to be extraordinarily powerful, particularly for those with privilege, the privilege of money, influence, affluence, whiteness, straightness, all of that. When you have privilege in the group, use it for good. Use it for good. This American moment is calling on us to stand up. As I said, this is not the moment we would have wanted to live in, but it is ours. White nationalism, violent white supremacy is on the rise in our America. We are seeing an erosion of rights. We are seeing such drastic income inequality, it makes your head spin. We are seeing in our own beloved city housing segregation, where an entire class of people, sometimes I feel like it's a caste of people, drive in from so far away to work in our stores and teach in our schools and work for our city, and then spend hours going home, serving us, but not welcome to live here with us because we've created a completely unaffordable city. Income segregated housing is a social justice issue, one of the most pressing of our time. So I invite you to think, when you think about all that matters and your own activism and your own priorities and time, what am I doing to ensure that this magnificent place is indeed welcoming of humans of all backgrounds as neighbors? The last thing I'm going to say is there is a unity rally tonight. There is a candidate for school board spewing hate. It's not a political event. It's at City Hall at 5:30. I'm one of the organizers, and we're just inviting everybody to come who wants to. It's going to be open mic. How brave is that? We don't know who's going to come. We're open mic, 30 seconds each. If you want to come and say, my name is, I live in, and then my family values are, you get 30 seconds. We all do for that. And we're just going to try to create this incredible feeling of art, because this candidate is running on traditional family values. So we want to respond with my family values are, and we hope to hear messages of love and inclusion and acceptance and belonging. And so you are welcome to come to that free event. Obviously it's free, 5:30 at City Hall. And I will stop there, and thank you for listening, and now we'll take your questions. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a seat. Let's stand up for all of those who need us to stand for them. All right, we're going to take questions.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much.
Question cards. Trudy's got a set of cards.
Who has a question? We have a microphone we can pass your way.
Thank you so much for this extraordinary presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for applying your brilliance and your honesty to this work, which is
Thank you. What a
so
kind
much
thing.
more
What is your first name?
My name is Andrew Bridges.
Andrew.
You and I think, competed against each other as trademark litigators
Oh
back
my
in
gosh.
the early 90s. I was at Wilson Sonsini and you were at Cooley.
You're absolutely right,
I think I
Andrew.
remember
Pleasure
your
to
name on
finally
some
meet
pleadings,
you.
yeah. And thank you for applying your brilliance and honesty to this work, which is extraordinary. I'd like to follow up on your last point about income inequality, because I get mildly enraged every time I go on 101 now and see that people have to pay to drive fast on 101. And I'm thinking about the people who are driving in from Modesto and Stockton to work on the peninsula, and who have to be stuck in the slow lanes, because if they had money to pay for fast lanes, they'd have money
They
to be
wouldn't be
living
in
here.
Modesto. Right.
And I'm just curious, as a real practical question here, is there a way, where do we go to try to say, or to set up a system, that if somebody's commuting more than 40 miles from a lower income housing area to here, they get that free fast track?
Yeah.
Or something like that, as a first step
Absolutely,
towards housing
Andrew. So
equality.
everyone's heard Andrew's question. We've got this new high-speed lane on 101. You pay a certain amount and you get to drive faster. And every time I'm on there, I have the same feeling you do. Wait a minute, isn't this privileging the privileged? And why should the privileged get places faster? We can't change that. I can't change that anytime soon. But what I am really interested in is what can we do to make it more likely that people aren't living in Modesto, but are here. We have a whole lot of people who are in leadership positions in this city, at the commission level, at the city council level, at just neighborhood activist level, who are anti-building more housing. I live near Maybell Avenue, which was supposed to have affordable housing for seniors, and that project got shut down 10 years ago, and the group that advocated for that to be shut down is now well in charge. And so we have to strongly advocate, not just for safe parking spaces, which are important, and transitional housing to move people from being unhoused to being housed and sheltered, but we have to look after working class, missing middle, it's called. Our own children who grew up here can't afford to live here. Our seniors can't necessarily afford to kind of downsize and stay in the city they love. Their healthcare and home care workers can't afford to live here. Our teachers can't afford to live here. Our utilities guys who want to fix the transformer that blows, if they live in Modesto, it takes them a while to get here. So we've got to build workforce housing, and we've got to build more affordable housing across the board, so that we don't have people who spend hours a day in their cars to come here and serve here, but can't benefit from living here. So it's affordable housing. Number one issue for me.
Thanks, Julie. We have a question here.
Julie, my name is Sandy Barron. I'm sorry, I do have a doctorate from Stanford, but I hope you won't hold that against me.
I don't hold it against anybody.
But I'm not a professor, and I've followed your career, so thank you for being here. My question, I'm a Mountain View resident, and when I moved back here from 10 years in Houston, Texas, the place I could afford to live was in Mountain View, and the San Antonio area. And it was a transition area at the time. And I would just like the city of Palo Alto, and perhaps you could comment on this, to take an example from Mountain View. Mm-hmm. There are things that are wrong with Mountain View, but I have been so proud of what we've done.
Yeah.
The redevelopment plan that I bought into 30 years ago has come to fruition.
Yeah.
And we are now housing
Yeah.
people who have left Redwood City,
Yeah.
who have left Palo Alto,
Yeah.
who have left other communities. I believe 2 of the churches who have the programs for parking RVs are in my town.
Yeah.
And so I would urge those of you who live in Palo Alto, and you, if you are successful, please look at what we've done
Yeah.
and what we continue to do.
Sandy,
So that's
I
my point.
appreciate that, and I 100% agree with you. I find myself looking south to Mountain View and like, wow, look what they've done with vision and intentionality. Look north to Redwood City, the revitalization of downtown Redwood City, outdoor eating, and people always seem to be milling about, and shops and all of that. We have lost our way, and we can find it again, and the examples are all around us. So I'm delighted that you're a proud resident of Mountain View, and I do look to the leaders of Mountain View for inspiration, the leaders plus the residents. As the civil grand jury of Santa Clara County pointed out last December, less than a year ago, they wrote a report. Did you know we had a civil grand jury? Well, we do. And they issued a report called Affordable Housing, The Tale of Two Cities. And they compared Mountain View and Palo Alto and lauded Mountain View, and then really pointed out that Palo Alto has fallen short. And they have 9 findings, each of which has sub-findings, but 2 of them boil down to our leadership here has failed to make the case to our residents why housing is a good. We need more of that. The moral leadership, housing as a human right.
Thanks, Julie. Any other questions? We're close to 12:30, so I
Yes,
don't want
I
to
appreciate
go
everyone
over our
being
time.
here and your time on
So we'll take a
Sunday.
question from Diane, then I think Matt wants to say a few words.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
This was
Diane.
really beautiful. I was rewatching your conversation with Pastor Smith, and in that you mentioned something that you've just talked about, that you yourself have biases. All of us have biases, but you do something so that you don't hate yourself when you find yourself thinking these biases. And I just want to bring up something that many of us who have adult children may encounter. Our kids are way more woke than we are. And despite all the work that we have done, it sometimes happens that we're having a conversation and we're thinking that, we're having a lovely conversation about matters of race. And our young adult kids will say, "What?"
Yeah.
And I'm just, I know the thing to say is, "I'm so sorry, thank you for pointing that out." But it also comes with such self-loathing. Like, how is it that after all this work and all these good intentions, I am still in that place? So this is kind of a confession. You've heard this from me before. But I was wondering if you
Yes.
could comment on that. Like,
What a beautiful question, Diane. I think you are identifying something many of us, perhaps most, have experienced. I think I'm a good person. I work hard at, my own character, my own growth, and yet I've been called out. And when it's our kids, there's that extra dynamic, right? The first thing I want to say is our kids are more woke. You use that word. I will say our kids are better educated. They are the most diverse generation in American history. They've grown up with social and emotional learning. They've grown up with the teaching of the fullness of American history. Let's make sure those things never go away, right? They appreciate that all humans matter, but that historically they haven't all mattered, so we have to do the work to really be inclusive. They get that in their bones. I am a huge Gen Z and millennial fan for that reason. Our youth are so much more evolved in so many ways. They still need to learn things from us, but they also they are the manifestation of our dreams to be better, and sometimes they call us on things. So I respond with thank you for calling me out. I am a work in progress. I will say that to my own children. I'll say that to all of you. I'll say it to strangers. I am here to learn and grow until I take my last breath. And I think there's a graciousness in that we can offer ourselves and each other. Like, none of us is perfect. None of us is flawless. We are all learning and growing. We are all imperfect. To use the language of Christianity, we're all sinners. and we're hoping for forgiveness, and we need to forgive each other and work hard to be better. And so within that space, there's such room for grace and ease and growing. And so I think offering that, thank you. I'm a work in progress. I appreciate that. Would you mind going a step further and helping me understand why what I said was not helpful? Don't want to burden you with having to educate me, but if you're willing, I am open, right? So asking to be further taught. And then the self-loathing is, with my mindfulness practice, when I screw something up, when I'm embarrassed or ashamed at something I just did or said, yes, that happens to me. I'm not better than you. Okay, I will say to myself, wow, Julie, well, you just did that. And then myself says back to myself, yep, it's okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're trying. Do you need to make amends? Do you need to apologize? Do you need to... I have this dialogue with myself, and it's a soothing conversation. It's not me what's wrong with you? It's wow, you're human, and that didn't go the way it might have, So it's when the self-loathing comes, see if you can quiet that with a kindness, where you say, you know what? We don't have to beat ourselves up, whether you want to talk in the plural or the individual. I don't have to beat myself up. I'm learning and growing. I'm going to be better for this next time because I had this experience. Okay, replace shame with a willingness with the expectation and confidence that I am growing from this. Yeah,
One more question, if you'll indulge us.
absolutely.
Mary?
From Father McDermott. Oh, okay. Yes.
This is just similar.
Say your
but-
name.
Oh, Mary.
Mary.
Similar but a little bit different is sometimes I'll sense, this is not going well, right? Something's being said that's harmful or hurtful. And then I'll be my brain starts oh no, they said it, And then I don't know, I think part of it is I'm in such shock
Yeah.
that somebody's said this or done this or whatever. And then I'm I guess maybe it's practicing, but how do I help call somebody out in a responsible way for everyone in the room, And because sometimes I think it's not that I don't want to or they don't notice, I'm noticing, but I don't know exactly how to express, how to name it in the room.
Mary, thank you for that. Often we have these conversations on the drive home about what we should have said or could have said, if only. I had that moment when I interacted with this candidate who, I tried to have a meaningful encounter, and after the fact, my former litigation self was like, this is what you should have said. This would have been the argument that won the jury, I know I'm capable of summoning some great rhetoric at times, but I didn't with her in real time. And so I was feeling a bit embarrassed, I didn't show up with well, of course you didn't. You were feeling traumatized. It was hard to just be there. Go easy on yourself, Julie. You said something that was better than nothing. So the first thing I offer you is look around and ask, do I feel safe? Is this a space where I can maybe take a step towards saying what I want to say and be safe? We have to choose our moments. We can't necessarily respond everywhere. Like me with the blackface at the party, I looked around and decided it will get worse for me if I speak up now. And so I chose to leave and didn't say anything, okay? If you do feel like I'm going to say something, then you ask yourself, what is it that I want to say? And, and maybe just saying, I am in shock by what I'm hearing. I'm not even sure I know, the literal thing you just said to me. Maybe you can say that. Choose a tone that isn't combative. Try to choose a tone that's, maybe cross your arms and look down and just say, I'd like you to know that I'm hearing things that I'm finding disturbing and I'm having trouble even finding language, but I just want to acknowledge that this is what's happening for me. And that may be enough. And you never know what your bravery right then is activating in the person next to you who's now okay, Mary just said that, maybe I can say something. And maybe not. Maybe it's just you and the person, and maybe that's all. But I would offer you that is infinitely more, fighting for the justice, army than not saying anything, okay? And we always want to proceed with dignity and kindness, right? So we're never trying to be better than the other person or, demean them. What we're trying to do is show up with the full force of our faith and our values and our love. You're feeling emotional right now. Yeah. Right on. Right on. Yeah. This is where we are. I applaud you. Okay? I'm feeling it. I got you. We are collectively doing this. Okay? It's all right to be afraid. It's all right to not know, to not have all the answers. In Palo Alto, we're so smart and so educated and so this and that. Sometimes it's like, if I can't be amazing at this, I want to invite you that it's amazing to have these feelings and to be summoning a thought about what to do about it. We are all stronger than we realize, okay? All right. Whew, my goodness. Father McDermott, come and wrap this all up in a beautiful, beautiful bow.
Thank you. What I want to say is thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing these powerful words. Thank you for your emotion. I love it when people get emotional up here because I do it all the time. We were careful to announce about your appearing, especially with the timing, that this is not an endorsement for you, your appearance. But I want to say, as the grandparent of biracial grandchildren, that I'm a personal fan. To everything you've talked about and the way you've shared with us, for me, is about the mindfulness of Jesus and what we learn from Jesus, and words of compassion, truth-telling, mercy, and mostly transformation. May it be so. So I wish you well, and thank you for helping us to learn and to grow. And we would like to, in your honor, send a check to the Absalom Jones Fund, which is named after the first black African-American person ordained in the Episcopal Church in 1804, became an abolitionist, a fund supporting historically black colleges and universities. We will happily send a check in your honor for thanks again for being here. Let's show our support to Julie.
I appreciate you. We are all in this together. None of us more important than any other. Let's all play our part, all play our role, okay? Our moment needs us. Our children, I like to say in 2070, when most of us will not be here, I'll be 103 if I'm alive in 2070, I'm hoping that those folks will look back on the courage and decisions made now and feel gratitude for what we did. We have that opportunity, so let's not squander it. Thank you.